Okay, so I finally played Elden Ring, and my god, that was insane. I think I've made it clear that I'm not very good at video games, especially non-hand-holding ones. I mean, the only non-hand-holding game that I ever played was Metal Gear Solid, and I struggled with that. But when I jumped into Elden Ring, I was not prepared for what I was going to be getting myself into. Elden Ring is From Software's new installment of the Soulsborne series. I'm saying brand new like it didn't come out almost 2 years ago. Now, to make it clear, I've never played a Souls game in my life, which is very important to clarify because I had no prior experience with how a Souls game functioned or worked. I didn't know if it was going to be easy, hard, or what the learning curve was going to be like for a moron like me. You know, I didn't really know anything about it. You guys have suggested that I give Elden Ring a shot and that I may like the game, which honestly, I've been wanting to play the game for a while now, but that $60 price tag was a little too much. But I bought it, played over 100 hours of it, and I'd say once I got the starting section of the map unlocked and got the hang of the gameplay loop, I got the combat of the game down, that's when I'd say that I was indeed in love with Elden Ring. Now, I'm not gonna make this a why Elden Ring is a masterpiece video. I mean, there's a million videos saying why the game is a masterpiece. Instead, I want to talk about some of the things that I feel like people tend to gloss over and overlook because of this game's reputation. Now, this video isn't meant to shit or offend the Soulsborne or Elden Ring fanbase. This is just my perspective of me going into the game blind without having played any of the other Dark Souls games. Now look, I get it, someone criticizing your favorite game. If someone made a video criticizing Red Dead Redemption 2, I'd be just as butthurt. But you're free to disagree with me. And I feel like before I start diving into the problems with this game, I feel like I should start this video out by getting some of the good of the game out the way really quickly, starting with the character creation. I think Elden Ring's customization is pretty damn good for what it is. You can go really into detail from eyes to aging to your character's voice, which I thought was pretty dumb because your character doesn't have a single word of dialogue, but your character can do different gestures in the game that initiates them to say different words. Now, the customization in this game isn't like the best in the world, like I would still put any Saints Row game over it, but for me being the kid that spends way too long in the character creation, I was satisfied for what I got. And the game's open world is fucking crazy. As soon as I was released into the open world after the tutorial section, my goodness, it was something else, and I was very quickly able to immerse myself into it. And literally 30 seconds later, I got destroyed by a giant boss enemy. And after that, I respawned, walked around, got killed again. So I respawned again, talked to some people, and I didn't really know what to do. The amount of non-hand holding in this game goes above and beyond. Literally, once the game throws you into free roam, it tells you good luck and does not tell you jack shit. Elden Ring feels like moving to a completely brand new state and entering a new school where you don't know a single person. But I very much appreciate this from Software. It's up to you how you want to just play the game, basically. And I'm not gonna make it seem like the game doesn't like teach you anything. Like, yeah, it makes it clear that it's not holding your hand, but there's an entire tutorial section. And the game even gives you little messages that you can use as little hints throughout the game. Just don't listen to the ones that tell you to jump off cliffs, because I might have fallen for those a few times. Builds are probably also the most important parts of Elden Ring. Essentially, you focus on certain stats for a specific playstyle you want to play as. You guys aren't stupid, I don't know why I'm explaining this. Now, I went with just the basic samurai build with the Yuji Kitani as my main weapon. Used a YouTube guide for that because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. But you can pick other builds that fit your playstyle. And for whatever primary weapon that you choose for your build, you focus on certain stats to buff that certain weapon out. Now, I don't think there's any like best stats in Elden Ring. I mean, there's obviously stats that should put points into no matter what build you are, like your vigor and endurance. And one of my favorite aspects of Elden Ring is the game teaches you how to play the game without actually telling you how to play the game. Like going against certain boss enemies that you were clearly not ready for and just don't have the proper weapons and equipment yet. There were countless times during my playthrough where I would just die, get so frustrated not even land a single hit. And I would just think, how is this even possible? But then I stopped and realized the game is trying to tell you, hey, you're not ready to go against the big boys just yet. Explore a little bit of the open world, level up, get better weapons, buff them out more, focus on your build, and then come back and fight. It's just interesting how the game is like telling you like, slow down, you're not ready yet. It punishes the people who try to bum rush their way through it instead of actually learning and trying to actually get, you know, good at the game. Now, those are kind of the main elements that's From Software nails at and that I very much enjoy. There's obviously like minor things that I like the game having varied environments, the use of fast travel, the sick armor that you can get, the lore around certain characters and areas of the game, and just the open world in general. But okay, that's the positive out the way. I hope now going forward you can understand that I like this game. Now, hear me out. Boss fights. There's other things I'm gonna say, but I feel like this is like one of the main crucial elements of not only Elden Ring, but pretty much the entire Soulsborne series. Now again, I've never played a Souls game in my life, alright? Elden Ring was my first Souls game ever. But I think any veteran Dark Souls player can very much agree with me. The boss fights in Elden Ring suck dick. And when I say they suck, I know there's gonna be that group of people saying like, get good at the game, while just completely ignoring all of the problems. What I mean is the difficulty in this game, there's just no balance. One of the main issues that I have with boss fights is the unrealistic, unnecessary, drawn-out wind-ups, and then literally 200 milliseconds later they can smash and kill you. And this has to do with the player having to memorize the boss's combos. So instead of like the earlier Dark Souls games where you could just react naturally to an enemy's move, in Elden Ring you have to basically die a bunch of times so you can study and memorize and learn their combos. So sometimes it effectively turns into a waiting game, you waiting for that one specific move, and then when they make that move you attack them and dodge and then repeat that until their health goes down. Because if you time it wrong and hit them when you're not supposed to, they can just fuck you up basically. Which I think is very weird how the game is designed like that, you waiting for that one specific move and then you have to do that over and over and over. And just the completely unpredictable moves by certain bosses. I mean, I feel like that's kind of just like a cheap way to make the game difficult kind of. Which again, I'm not saying it's impossible, it's beatable, but man, is it fucking annoying. Like, you know how when you fight Godric, you see an opportunity to attack him, but when you go for the attack, he does that stupid move that you physically just cannot avoid. And the only way that you can avoid that is if you have studied and memorized his moves and know that, okay, so after this one, he's probably gonna do this move, so I should probably hang back. And like, don't get me wrong, I was happy when I killed Godric, but even then, I was still like, dude, that was a bullshit fight and it shouldn't have lasted that long. From what I've heard and watched for this video, the bosses in Dark Souls 3 look a lot more engaging and thrilling and just look more fun. The AI doesn't look completely off the rails, the RNG isn't whack, it actually looks like a somewhat fair matchup, and they just look fun. The bosses in Elden Ring are not fun. Honestly, Elden Ring turns into like a game of spin the wheel sometimes. Hit them once, dodge, run around, wait for that one move again, and repeat that until their health goes down, which ends up just dragging these fights out for just way too long of a time period. If you're good enough, you can parry the bosses by blocking them with your shield and attacking them, but if you time it wrong, you're screwed. Honestly, my favorite boss in the game is probably the Mimic tier. Why? Because I think it's just so fun to be able to fight your own build. It's designed to be a completely fair matchup with no stupid, slow, boring, unbalanced gameplay. Unfortunately, the Mimic tier is objectively one of like the easiest fights in the game. Like, I wish it had the same skill as your character and wasn't a program of dumb AI, but I really do like what they were going for. Why aren't there more fights like this? This was so much fun. Everything else can go to hell. Also, can we mention the input delay as well with the bizarre boss mechanics? So for some reason, Elden Ring's player animations don't happen simultaneously. For example, when you tap O or B, depending if you're on Xbox or PlayStation, which is the dodge button, your character doesn't dodge immediately when you press O or B. Instead, your character dodges once you release the button. So when you want to dodge, once you tap it, your character dodges once you release the button, causing a slight delay. I thought it was a bug, but that's just how From Software designed it. And I don't really understand why it's like that. Literally every game that I've ever played has smooth responsive player animations. Nothing about Elden Ring's controls feels satisfying or seamless. It just makes for these bullshit deaths where I try to dodge but there's then almost a full second pause before my character actually moves. And that happens to me literally every boss fight. I dodge once, I hit O again, my character stands for almost a full second and then gets killed. Or when I try to run backwards, the animation for running doesn't start until like a full second later and I either get killed or I can run backwards. There's no other way to call it besides bullshit. Why can't anything about the controls just be seamless and when I tap it, it immediately initiates the animation? I've been trying to take it slow and actually get good at the game, which I think I have, but I just hate how you have to play by the game's rules while the bosses can do whatever the fuck they want. Jump across my screen like they're goddamn Spider-Man, fly away, come however far or close they want to me. With the actual Nastroborn of the Void boss fight, I probably fought this motherfucker 200 times before I eventually killed him. I'm able to dodge his attacks somewhat okay, but then he's able to teleport across the arena and then blindside me in less than a second and then grab attack me like I'm an ant and instantly kill me. Or you know how he does that thing where he lifts you in the air and then instantly kills you and there's like nothing you can do about it? Your character can't move out the way in time and there's no way for you to know that he's gonna do that. Which, by the way, if you're struggling with that boss fight, a tactic that I used was to stay against the wall, because if you're there he can't grab attack you, and when he does this move, attack him head on and then get your ass back to the wall because he can teleport and just kill you in one hit. I know it's not really fun or enjoyable, it's miserable as fuck and boring, but hey, if it works, it works. It's like they're completely in control of the fight and I can't do jack shit about it. And these bosses are especially worse if you're a melee build like me, because with some of these bosses, it's almost impossible to land a hit on them without them striking you with a combo that is literally impossible or incredibly difficult to dodge. And it's like some of these bosses, dude, are just like more infuriating than fun, because most of the time it's just unfair, slow, waiting around for gameplay. If they were hard as shit to do but actually also enjoyable and fun to do, I wouldn't be complaining about it. Every single time I enter a boss fight, I just dread it because I know it's just going to be a very slow, painful, miserable process. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say about boss fights. And I'm not sure if this input delay was like this in the earlier Dark Souls games, and if they were, because I really don't know, that still doesn't make it good just because they were in the earlier Dark Souls games. It's just a really weird game design to make the game difficult, and it's just not something that I can really justify. And I feel like bosses in general are just something that people just gloss over because this game can be amazing. And you know, it also doesn't help when you look up YouTube guides on how to kill certain bosses, like how to kill this boss the easiest and fastest way possible, and then you watch the video and their vigor is at like 90 and they have like the best armor and weapons in the game and they don't tell you how to get it at all. Like, YouTubers, please make your guides more clear and not make it seem like anyone can do it, because if they're not, then they're just useless. But now that I got that out of the way, let's move on to the next thing that I feel like this game isn't so good at. Its controls and player movement animations. And let me start off with its horse controls. They suck ass. I swear, riding torrents in Elden Ring makes me ill. It's so easy to accidentally fall off something, whether it be a cliff or a tiny little ledge, because turning in this game with a horse just sucks and doesn't work right. I don't know if it's as bad as Roach in The Witcher 3 or Skyrim's horse controls, but still, why is Rockstar Games like the only studio that can perfect horseback riding that actually feels fluent? I get that they made cowboy games and they had to make it like damn near perfect, but still, with all these talented studios like Naughty Dog and From Software, are they really the only ones? Is the Rage engine really the secret formula? Nowadays, probably. Though, to give horseback riding in this game credits, I do think it's cool how you can whistle your horse wherever you are. It makes getting out of highly guarded places much easier. I like how you don't have to dismount to pick up certain items. I do really wish we could customize torrents. I actually couldn't believe that you couldn't, and I think that's a really big missed opportunity. And no, I'm not one of those people that wants to throw horse armor on and make my horse run at like 2 miles an hour because it has 30 pounds of armor. But you know how in RDR2 you could customize your horse's hair, stirrups, its saddles, and its overall appearance? Because I don't know about you, but torrents looks pretty fucking ugly. Or even just like the option to like level up your horse would be pretty cool. Like if you get to a certain level, the game lets you triple jump instead of just double jumping. Or your horse can have its own powers that you can activate, like fire breathing. Alright, too much? But besides that, riding him is a pain. Like for me, both of the Red Dead Redemption games have simultaneously ruined horseback riding in most games. And I understand that horseback riding is secondary in most games and isn't the main focus, which okay, I'll give Elden Ring that. But I do find it weird how the actual like player animations and movements are janky. And I think From Software purposely made everything about the controls clunky just to make the game harder. Like your character will do something that you just did not want them to do, or in combat you can barely get clipped and you'll still get killed. And I get that this is just how Dark Souls games works, and honestly, this is probably just because I haven't played any Dark Souls games and Elden Ring is my first one. And it's also pretty much like the main skill of it. But I don't know, there's just something with how my character turns and runs. It's just so robotically and unnatural. But honestly, it's not really a huge problem, and it's just something I have to get used to. Now, a certain aspect of this game that I was not so impressed with was, the graphics. Now let me get this out the way. Visually and overall, the entire art direction of Elden Ring is fantastic. Like riding around Limgrave is just honestly insane. But the actual graphics, textures, and all of the character models aren't exactly what I was expecting. Going into Elden Ring, I had bought the PS5 version, a 60 FPS guaranteed, and I was expecting some next level stuff. And I know this argument always, sparks the Soulsborne fanbase to get, upset, which I'm not trying to do. Now look, I'm not someone who needs like Last of Us 2 state-of-the-art graphics for a game to be good and fun and enjoyable. What I didn't expect was this game to look almost exactly like Dark Souls 3, which came out in 2016. Graphically, I feel like for a game that came out in 2022 and took 5 years to develop with a $200 million budget, I think. I would expect a little bit more, and I'd expect it to look almost identical to a game that came out 8 years ago. Like, can you imagine what Elden Ring would look like if it looked somewhat close to Red Dead Redemption 2, which came out in 2018? Like, Elden Ring already blew me away, but it could have blown me away even more if it was just a little bit more polished. Like, there's certain parts and areas of the game where I'm like, you know, we've seen things better than this. I'd even go to the extent that if you were to show me a picture of Skyrim and Elden Ring's open world side by side of each other, I'd say, oh, they kind of look the same, which is not an insult to Elden Ring, that's just what I think. And I even tried to turn ray tracing on to see if it would make the game look a little bit better, which if you don't know, ray tracing is a technique that enhances the overall lighting and shadows to make the game look realistic, or more realistic. I'm sure you've seen those videos like GTA 5, Cyberpunk 2077, ultra realistic ray tracing graphics, 8K resolution, 490 bajillion graphics card, 144 FPS, and more big numbers. Some games this can work out and looks really fucking good. Like, I think Cyberpunk is one of the best examples of ray tracing. Driving through Night City with it turned on looks absolutely beautiful and buttery. But in Elden Ring, when I turned it on, I noticed like a 10% difference and noticed like a 90% frame rate drop difference. And I understand that it's like this for Cyberpunk as well, but at least my game just overall looks better and I can tell the big difference. My game went from 60 FPS to damn near below 30 with little to no difference. And playing a game like Elden Ring below 30 FPS is sickening. I'm sure that there is mods that you can buy to boost your performance, but I didn't buy Elden Ring on my computer because, you know, I've noticed that when I buy these big games on my computer, it always makes my computer shit itself. So to do yourself a favor, never turn ray tracing on in Elden Ring, because it is just not worth the frame rate drop for a slight saturation and brightness boost that you can barely tell. And other little things in this game that make no sense is the game removing the option to open your map when enemies are in the vicinity. Like, I get that the game probably doesn't want you to fast travel when enemies are in the vicinity, which, okay, but I don't understand to completely remove that option to open the map. Like, when I just want to see how far away I am from where I want to get to, or just where the hell I'm at, it's really annoying and pretty frustrating. And I was also going to talk about this game's interface design, but I figured that it would just kind of just be a waste of time. Sure, I spent a lot of times in inventories, but that's kind of been the main selling point of this series since Dark Souls 1. And you know, this was my first ever Souls game experience, so of course, I'm not really going to be used to it. But now that I got all of that out of the way, let me move on to something that everybody loves to talk about, the game not being clear. And this has to do a lot with the game's quest lines. So obviously, Elden Ring makes it very clear that it isn't holding your hand, and it's giving you all the freedom in the world to do whatever you want, how you want, and when you want. From the game just chucking you into the open world and not telling you a single thing, to 0 menu pop-ups and it not telling you anything. You are completely in control. However, I sort of feel like that's kind of the problem. Maybe not necessarily the game not giving you any like menu pop-ups, but the game is giving you all the freedom in the world, and in a way that kind of makes the game resort to you using guides all the fucking time. And you have to use guides so you actually just know what the fuck is going on. Because I don't think any sane person can play Elden Ring without using guides at some point. And let me just say to you, the quest lines in Elden Ring suck and make no sense. So from what I've heard and watched for this video, all of the Dark Souls quest lines all follow the same formula. You talk to someone, they begin talking absolute bullshit, and once they run out of dialogue, they go to a completely different area without you knowing, which leads to most players either pulling up a wiki or just pulling up a YouTube guide to figure out what they're supposed to do next, or just results in players just giving up. And Elden Ring does this as well. And way worse. The bigger problem is Elden Ring's open world is much bigger than any Dark Souls game, so the NPCs you encounter are more spread throughout the map and are much harder to find. I was trying to do the Ranni questline, which you can do after defeating the World Knight boss, and I specifically wanted to do this quest because there was a specific area of the map that I wanted to get to, but I couldn't get to it unless I completed this quest. Now, I wanted to see how much of this quest I can do without using a guide, and I'll explain a little bit of the quest. I'm not going to explain like the entire quest line because, well, you'll see why in a second. After I defeated the Royal Knight boss, I spoke to Ranni. She began telling me a little bit about her past, and I didn't really care that much, so I sat through that dialogue. She then told me to go meet 3 of her people, e.g. Blyde and Celavis. I talked to them. They're actually in completely different locations, but to start this quest, they're both in the same tower where Ranni is, so you could actually meet all 3 of them quicker. After I finished speaking to all 3 of them, she then told me to go to Necron City. I don't know where that is. So I quickly looked it up on Google, and apparently you're supposed to speak to EJ, who's a blacksmith, and he tells you that Necron is an underground city in the underworld. He ended up telling me where I could speak to Blyde, so I went down to the underworld, had trouble finding him, but I eventually spotted him. He told me that he doesn't have much to report on, and that I should go talk to Celavis, so I went back to Celavis's rise, which is right next to Ronnie's rise. He then told me to go speak to the Sorcerer, which is the lady where you can buy different spells from. I then had to defeat Radahn, a pretty easy boss fight. I cheesed my way through it, but after I defeated Radahn, a giant crater appeared in the ground, and I was finally able to access Necron City. I explored a little bit of it, and after that, I then decided to go speak to the NPC to see if I could get any next leads on what I could do next for the quest. And just when I felt like I was able to do this organically, when I went to speak to them, most of them disappeared, and I did not know where they went. So what did I do? I rode around for 10 minutes, got bored, and pulled up a 40-minute YouTube guide on how to finish this quest line. And once I started following this guide, it felt like I was just going through the motion. I had no idea what the fuck was going on. None of it made any sense to me. Everything felt so random and convoluted for no reason, but I was just following this guide. I even looked through the comments, and everybody was like, yeah, how is any casual player supposed to find any of this on their own? When you try to do these quests on your own, there is literally no way to know where these characters are or where they went because the world is so big. They could literally be anywhere. And just the entire way they're all structured is so confusing and does not make any sense. Sometimes when I'm looking up a guide, it's just so funny how obscure and convoluted everything is that I just stopped doing them because I really just cannot be bothered to. And just the biggest issue I have is just that I want to do a quest without having to use a guide. And even then I'm still lost because the game does an atrocious job at explaining it to you. And I notice this a lot, like with using guides, it makes the game feel less of an adventure and more of a glorified checklist simulator. I started skipping a lot of dialogue every time I spoke to someone, not because they were boring me, just because I just didn't understand what the hell was going on. I just wanted to complete the quest for the sake of completing it, not that I actually cared about it, which really does suck. Also, wouldn't you think like it would be a little bit more helpful if the game had like a way to check how many quests you've completed? Like, is that too much to ask? Like just a little way for me to check in my stats how many quests I've done? Is that too hand-holding? I mean, even Skyrim allowed you to see how many quests you've done, and I understand that it's purposely designed like that to make it confusing, but I feel like there's like a certain points where non-hand-holding games are just not really that fun. If you're just making it so obscure and borderline impossible to do organically without using guides, then just like what's the point then? And sorry if it sounds like I'm whining so much, I just feel like these are just such big issues that I feel like people just gloss over and overlook because of how good this game can be. And I see these issues get brought up all the time on platforms like Reddit, but they always get downplayed by people telling them to like get good and you're not good at the game and stop complaining, while just completely ignoring all of the problems. Now obviously with all of these complaints and problems with the game that I do not like, do not outweigh the good of this game in the slightest. Would I recommend that you play Elden Ring? Absolutely, this game is almost a 10 out of 10. Its immersive world is what mainly drew me and sucked me in so quickly before I even started doing anything or even knew what the hell was going on. I mean, nowadays I hear people always say that it's hard to immerse themselves into certain games, and with Elden Ring, you are going to be immersed. No game is perfect without its flaws, and Elden Ring has its flaws. I will say though, if you're someone who can't be bothered to go through this game's learning curve and just want to relax and play a game without your temper being raised, then this game is definitely not for you. Because if you're thinking about getting into Elden Ring, you're just gonna have to be prepared to die and rage a lot because this game will mentally push you to your breaking point. And it's funny because I've played well over 100 hours of Elden Ring, yet I've barely scratched the surface of what you can actually do in this game. I don't know how people are finishing this game so quickly. I mean, there's like what, 200 bosses, even though it's only like 11 required ones to beat the game, but still, there's loads of other builds that I really want to test out. There's like 30 other quest lines, even though I'm probably not going to do any of them. I haven't even touched the game's co-op and PvP mode with other players, which is really going to test my skill level and if I'm actually good at this game. I really want to check out the game's DLC, and there's just so much left to uncover and explore. And even though this game's flaws are obvious and can be bullshit sometimes, I am having a lot of fun with Elden Ring. I am going to eventually take a break from the game in the near future because I feel like in a lot of ways this game is making me a worse person, but I love the game. Thank you all so much for watching to the end of this video. I also want to say thanks so much for the support on my last video, my Saints Row video. I mentioned how it was my first time recording on camera and I was a little iffy on how the video was going to turn out, but you guys seem to really like it, which is great to know. And you may also notice that I'm starting to post 2 to 1 videos a month, and that's because I'm trying to make my videos more longer and more in-depth now, and I'm trying to really put quality over quantity. You know, I don't want to put just a shitty 10-minute video every week, you know, that's not what I want to do. Plus, school is starting in a few weeks for me, so it's just going to work out much better for my schedule. But thanks for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, really helped this channel out a lot, and I'll see you guys in my next video. See ya.